A black janitor found a crying girl in the CEO's office. What she whispered exposed a $2 billion lie. Late at night on the top floor of a glass tower, a janitor found a 9-year-old girl hiding under the CEO's desk, clutching a dead phone. She wouldn't come out for security. She only came out for the man with the mop. And when she finally spoke, she whispered 8 words that should have sounded like a child's imagination. But the janitor used to be a safety engineer, and he knew that no 9-year-old could describe an electronic brake failure that precisely. Stay with this one to the end and hit subscribe now, because the lie this little girl uncovered was worth $2 billion, and the people protecting it were willing to do anything to keep it buried. Elijah Carter was 41 years old, and every night he made himself invisible for a living. He worked the night shift as a janitor at Vail Meridian, a technology and transport company worth around $2 billion, in a 42-story glass tower where the CEO's office sat at the very top, and the important people never once learned his name. He was a single father to an 11-year-old son named Noah, and he took the night shift for reasons that had nothing to do with preference. It came with health insurance for his boy. It left his days free to raise him, and it kept him far from the eyes of anyone who might remember his face from the news. Because Elijah had not always pushed a mop. He had been a vehicle safety certification engineer, a good one until a scandal at another company. A control system had a flaw, a test technician was injured, and Elijah had refused to certify the product as safe. His supervisors altered his report, reused his old signature, and when it all came apart, the company let the failure fall on him. His colleagues stayed quiet to keep their jobs. His license was suspended. He lost his career and nearly lost custody of Noah in the financial ruin that followed. He learned a lesson in that fire that he could not unlearn. Knowing the truth does not mean anyone will let you tell it. But the engineer never left him. Elijah could still read a schematic in the dark. He could still spot the difference between a machine that broke on its own and one that was made to break. He noticed things a conference room used after hours, a legal department's trash can full of shredded paper, an access log that did not match the door it belonged to, the smell of metal and motor oil on an executive floor where there should be no oil at all. When his coworkers teased him for watching everything like a cop, he told them, when your whole job is putting things back where they belong, you notice when something doesn't belong. His son Noah was 11, quiet and obsessed with architectural photography. He shot stairwells and back corridors and glass and repeating structures, and he had an eye for the smallest change in a space. He was making a project he called The Places No One Looks: Fire Escapes, Service Doors, Machine Rooms, and the Workers Who Move Through the World Just Outside Everyone's Attention. The subject was, though the boy didn't say it, his own father. And that project would turn out to contain evidence that could not be faked because a camera does not know when it is recording a crime. At the top of the tower was Amelia Vail, 38, the CEO. She held 41% of the company. She had inherited part of the business and built the rest into a $2 billion empire by herself, sharp, decisive, hard to manipulate. She was also the single mother of a 9-year-old daughter named Lily, and she loved her daughter and almost never saw her. Assistants picked Lily up. A nanny went to the school events. Gifts stood in for hours. Amelia believed that building an empire was how you protected your child's future. Lily felt she would always come second to the company. Amelia trusted data over feelings, trusted her brother and her operations team, and had waved off a few technical warnings because the people she trusted told her they were nothing. Her daughter Lily was 9, sensitive, bright, and forever being told she imagined too much. When she felt unsafe, she hid in her mother's office. She drew beautifully and remembered the world in pictures, but she could not translate what she overheard into the language adults would believe. And a few weeks earlier, hiding where no one thought to look, Lily had overheard a conversation about sabotaging the brakes on her mother's car. She had seen a person swapping a component in the company garage. She was so frightened she told no one, not the police, not her family. She would only trust one person eventually. For one reason, he was the only adult who did not force her to talk. The villain of this story wore a kind face. Adrian Vail, 44, was Amelia's younger brother, the executive vice president, a man who had spent his whole life in his sister's shadow and convinced himself he was the one who truly deserved to run the company. He was gracious in public, warm with Lily, the loving uncle. And in private, He had secretly invested in a competitor through a hidden account, signed a covert deal to sell Vale Meridian once he seized control and buried a serious flaw in the company's new electronic brake control system. He knew Amelia had begun to suspect something and intended to pause the product launch and open an internal investigation. So Adrian arranged an accident to take his sister off the board just long enough to trigger an emergency clause and grab voting control. He did not think of himself as a murderer. He told himself, one person cannot matter more than thousands of employees and a deal worth billions. He was helped by Marcus Voss, the 50-year-old head of security, a former cop who controlled the cameras, the access, and the guards. Marcus had erased the garage footage. He had done it for money at first. But after the accident, he began to understand that Adrian might be willing to remove even Lily to eliminate a witness, and that understanding would slowly turn him into the weak link in the whole conspiracy. Here is how the night began. It starts 24 hours before Elijah found the girl. Elijah woke at 6 in the morning after his shift, made breakfast, checked Noah's school schedule, and helped him sort the photographs for his project, The Places No One Looks. The fire stairs, the back halls, the machine rooms, the delivery door, the working people at the edges of the frame. Before he slept, an email arrived telling him his engineering license still did not qualify for reinstatement. He deleted it before Noah could see. He had gotten very good at deleting things before his son could see them. That same day, Amelia Vale left the office late after a bitter argument with her brother. Before she drove off, she sent a voice message to her lawyer, "Freeze the vote. I found a problem in the test records." The message never arrived. Her phone had been tampered with. On the way home, she pressed the brake and the car did not respond. It shot through an intersection and struck a concrete barrier. She survived head injury, a broken leg, a brief coma. By morning, the news called it an accident caused by an overworked executive losing focus, and Adrian appeared before the cameras as the grieving younger brother, steady and sorrowful, already talking about stability and leadership. While the adults fixed their eyes on Amelia's condition and the stock price, no one watched Lily. An assistant brought her to the office to collect a few of her mother's things. The adults argued about paperwork and voting rights. Nobody noticed the girl slip out of the waiting room and hide in the one place she believed was safe, her mother's office. She had an old phone with her on which she had recorded part of the conversation in the garage. The phone died before she could make anyone listen. That is when Elijah found her. He was cleaning the hallway on the 42nd floor near midnight when he noticed the CEO's office door standing open. It should have been sealed while Amelia was in the hospital. He heard a small, hitching sob inside. He stepped in and found Lily hidden under her mother's desk, both hands wrapped around a dead phone. She would not go with security. So Elijah did not reach for her. He sat down on the floor a few steps from the desk and said, "I'll just sit here. You don't have to talk until you're ready." He did not look at her while he waited. He had learned raising Noah that some children can only be reached when you take your eyes off them, when you stop being a thing that wants something from them. So he wiped down a baseboard he had already cleaned and hummed a little low tuneless, and he waited. Minutes passed. The tower ticked and settled around them, 42 floors of empty glass. A while later, Lily crawled out and took hold of his sleeve and whispered, "My mom didn't have an accident. Someone made the car forget how to stop." Elijah went cold. As a former safety engineer, he knew that a 9-year-old could not invent a description that precise, that a child does not on her own describe an electronic brake signal being interrupted. He was about to ask her more when the elevator chimed. A man stepped into the hallway and called out gently, "Lily, Uncle Adrian's here to take you home." The girl's grip tightened on Elijah's arm, and she said the sentence that pulled him into all of it. "That's the voice I heard in the garage." Elijah didn't call for security because he had watched a 9-year-old go rigid with fear at the sound of her own uncle's name, and he trusted that fear more than he trusted anyone in the building. He asked her if there was someone else she wanted him to call. Lily said she didn't trust anybody in the tower. So he took her down to the janitor's break room, the one place with no company cameras, and gave her water and a sheet of paper. Instead of pressing her to talk, he said, "You can draw what you remember." Lily drew. A black car. A hand wearing a triangle ring, a small silver box wired under a dashboard, the letter A on a jacket, a person standing behind a glass wall, 3 red lights. Elijah looked at the silver box for a long time and recognized it for what it was, a communication unit for a braking system. Adrian arrived with Marcus Voss. He was soft, reasonable, and asked Elijah to hand the girl over to her family. Lily would not accuse her uncle to his face. Elijah had no legal right to hold her, and he had to let her go. But before she left, Lily secretly slipped the dead phone into Elijah's cleaning cart. Adrian looked at the janitor and said, "You just do your job. Don't turn a frightened little girl's confusion into a story she doesn't understand." Elijah answered, "I think the problem is that she understands more than you'd like." Elijah found the dead phone in his cart at the end of the shift, tucked under a roll of trash liners where no adult's hand would think to reach, and he understood that a terrified 9-year-old had done the one deliberate, courageous thing available to her. She had chosen the man with the mop over the man with the ring. She had trusted the invisible person. It was the smartest decision anyone made in the entire affair, and she was 9 years old. At home, Noah helped his father repair the phone's charging port. The port was broken, but the data was intact. It was the kind of small, patient work the two of them were good at, the father and the son, heads bent together over a tiny screw under a lamp. And for a moment, Elijah forgot what was on the phone and just felt the ordinary miracle of a boy who trusted him. Then the screen lit up, and the ordinary part of the night was over. On it, a short video of the garage floor, Adrian's voice arguing with someone, a sentence, "By morning she won't be clear-headed enough to stop the vote." The sound of metal being fitted into a car, a partial image of a hand with a ring, a door closing, and Lily softly calling her mother's name. The face of the speaker was not visible. It was suspicious. It was not yet proof. Elijah studied Lily's drawings alongside the audio. The silver box, he realized, could be a signal spoofing device. Fitted to an electronic braking system, it could delay the pedal's response, feed false data to the black box so the crash looked like driver error and erase itself after a set time. This was not a random accident. It was calculated sabotage. Noah asked how his father knew such a thing. Elijah told him part of the truth. The old company, the injured technician, the report. He refused to sign the signature they stole. The blame, they made him carry the colleagues who stayed silent. Knowing the truth, Elijah said, doesn't mean anyone will give you a chance to say it. Noah answered, "But if you don't say it, the person who did it gets to be the only one who tells the story." Elijah took the phone to the police, but the video showed no face. The phone belonged to a minor. There was no proof the device had ever existed. The official technical report said the car had not been tampered with, and Adrian had already informed everyone that Lily was traumatized and might remember things wrong. An investigator promised to look into it and quietly routed the file to the ordinary traffic accident division. Elijah understood then that the company controlled the flow of information and that he had seen this movie before from the inside. Amelia woke in the hospital. Adrian controlled her visitors and told her Lily was being well cared for. But Vanessa Cole, the company's head of legal, who had begun to notice records that did not add up, quietly brought Elijah to the hospital. Amelia looked at his janitor's uniform and made no attempt to hide her skepticism. Elijah told her that her daughter believed the car had been sabotaged. Amelia answered coldly, "My daughter almost lost her mother. I won't let you turn her fear into a theory." Elijah set the phone on the table and said, "And I won't let a grown-up turn what a child saw into imagination just because the truth is inconvenient." He played her the recording. She still did not fully believe. She asked him to leave. Adrian moved fast. He called the board together and laid out his case. Amelia had a head injury. Her judgment was uncertain. A multi-billion-dollar contract was at risk. The company needed interim leadership, and the emergency clause allowed voting power to transfer. If he succeeded, he could close his secret deal, erase the technical records, declare Amelia unfit, and sell the company before she recovered. Then Marcus Voss discovered Elijah had copied the service elevator logs, and Adrian had him suspended on the spot, accused of stealing data, interfering with Lily's property, causing a disturbance at the hospital, and spreading conspiracy theories. Noah's insurance would lapse at the end of the month. The landlord raised the rent. Adrian sent a quiet offer through an intermediary, a large sum of money, a new job in another state in exchange for the phone, and a signed agreement to stay silent. Elijah refused. Lily ran away from Adrian's house and came to Elijah's apartment. She said her uncle kept asking her the same questions. How much had she heard? Where was the phone? Had she told anyone about the ring? She felt he did not want to protect her. He wanted to measure how dangerous she was. Elijah called Amelia, but did not hand Lily back to Adrian. Amelia, hearing the fear in her daughter's voice over the phone, was forced to trust Elijah enough to let Lily stay a few hours while lawyers arranged an independent guardian. Now, Noah did the thing no adult had managed. Lily could not tell the story in order, so Noah did not make her. He laid his photographs of the building on the table and let her point to where she had stood. Through the pictures, they established the truth: Lily had not been inside the main garage. She had watched through the glass wall of a technical corridor. A maintenance truck had been parked near the door. Someone other than Adrian had been there too. And the jacket with the letter A did not belong to Adrian. It belonged to a contractor called Apex Dynamics, the very company secretly tied to Adrian's hidden deal. Then Noah remembered his own photographs. 2 weeks before the accident, he had come to wait for his father's shift to end and had photographed the architecture around the delivery bay. In one frame, Amelia's car in the distance, an Apex Dynamics truck, Adrian standing beside a technician, and Marcus Voss opening the garage door after hours. The timestamps showed the car had been accessed before the crash. The photo did not prove they sabotaged it, but it destroyed the claim that Adrian had never entered the garage. From the component code in Lily's drawing, Elijah traced the sabotage device back to a prototype developed by Vale Meridian itself, and that led to the larger secret. The company's $2 billion safety system had a critical vulnerability. Adrian had known for months. Test crashes had already happened. Reports had been reclassified as human error. Amelia had recently found the inconsistencies and meant to pause the contract. Adrian had sabotaged her car to take away her ability to intervene. If the flaw became public, the huge government contract would collapse. The company's value would crater. Adrian would lose his hidden profit, and the board could face investigation. The $2 billion lie was not just the cover-up of one accident. It was the entire inflated worth of a company built on a system that could kill. Amelia looked at Noah's photographs and Elijah's analysis and saw the product code match the document she had found before the crash. She admitted the truth she had been avoiding. An engineer had warned her she had judged it minor. Adrian had assured her it was fixed, and she herself had signed off on continuing toward launch. Elijah did not comfort her with soft words. He said, "Your mistake was trusting the wrong person. Their crime was knowing the truth and letting other people get hurt anyway." The two of them began to work together. Amelia was not strong enough to appear in public, so she gave Elijah her access codes, and he and Vanessa went into the tower at night to find the untampered records. Elijah went back in his janitor's uniform because it was the only way he could move through the building unseen. The irony was not lost on him. In a suit, he would have been followed. With a mop, he was furniture. On the technical floor, Elijah noticed a wall that was shorter than the building's dimensions should allow. Behind the ventilation system, he found a hidden storage room. Inside, faulty controller signal spoofing devices, test drives, a crash simulation car, files on fired engineers, and a secret payment ledger. And on that ledger was the name of the supervisor who had blamed Elijah years ago at his old company. Adrian had bought Elijah's former employer. He had used that company's flawed technology to build the current system. And Elijah had been the first person to discover the vulnerability years before. His arrival at Vale Meridian was not entirely chance. Someone in hiring had deliberately placed him on the night shift to watch whether he still had his old files, to keep him away from the engineering team, to hold him in a position where no one would believe a word he said. He had thought he was just unlucky. In truth, the system had been keeping him quiet for years. Elijah stood in that hidden room and felt the shape of his whole life rearrange. For years he had believed he had simply failed, that he had been too rigid, too unlucky, that the world had rolled over him the way it rolls over honest men. Now he saw the truth: he had not been unlucky. He had been managed. Someone had put him in a coverall on a night shift, the way you put a dangerous document in a locked drawer. The uniform he had worn out of shame had been chosen for him out of fear of what he knew. It was almost funny. They had been so afraid of him that they had turned him invisible, and being invisible was exactly how he had found their room. Marcus Voss cornered Elijah there. Elijah thought he was about to be arrested. Instead, Marcus told him Adrian had ordered the cameras erased at the house where Lily was staying. Marcus understood Adrian might mean to hurt the girl to remove the witness. He wanted out, but he was afraid of prosecution. Elijah made him no promises. "I can't erase what you've done," he said. "I can only give you the chance to stop doing the next thing." Marcus stood there a long moment, a former cop who had spent a career telling himself he was one of the good ones, and then he handed over a copy of the garage video. He did not yet stand publicly with them. But a crack had opened in the conspiracy, and cracks let in light. Adrian went on the attack, and he did it the way his kind always does, not with fists, but with paper and headlines. The media reported that Elijah had lost his engineering license, had once been investigated over a test accident, was a struggling single father in financial trouble, had approached the CEO's daughter without permission, and was accused of extorting the company. Every fact was technically true, and everyone was a knife turned the wrong way. The public decided he was a bitter man using a frightened child to take revenge on a corporation. Kids at school shared the articles with Noah, and Noah came home with his jaw set and his eyes wet and would not say what had happened until his father pried it out of him gently over dinner. That night, Elijah sat on the edge of his son's bed and said he was thinking about stopping, about handing the phone back and taking the money and the job, and the other state about giving Noah a quiet life. He said it as an offering, a father trying to protect his child. Noah listened to all of it the way Elijah had taught him to listen, and then he said, "I'm not scared of them thinking you're a bad guy. I'm scared of you letting a bad guy finish the story." It was almost word for word the thing Elijah's own conscience had been whispering for years, and he had learned to ignore. Coming out of his 11-year-old's mouth, he could not ignore it anymore. Adrian used incomplete medical records to petition a court for temporary control of the company, claiming Amelia was confused after her injury, manipulated by a disgruntled ex-engineer, no longer acting in shareholders' interest, placing a child's story above expert data. The board scheduled a transfer of power meeting in 48 hours. Then before that meeting, the assigned guardian was diverted and Lily vanished from the hospital. Adrian announced the girl had run off in a panic. But Lily had left a drawing behind a building, 3 red windows, an arrow pointing down a star on a door. Noah recognized it, an old conference level beneath the tower where there had once been a children's room for employees. Adrian was holding Lily there to force her to hand over the phone and change her story. Elijah and Marcus went down through the service elevators, the freight shafts, the passages, behind the passages, the parts of the building Elijah knew better than any executive, because cleaning them had been his job. That was the thing the powerful never understood. They owned the tower. He knew it. They found Lily locked in a room, unhurt but terrified, guarded by an Apex Dynamics employee. Elijah didn't charge in swinging. He was not a fighter, and a fight would have gotten the girl hurt. He was a man who understood systems. He triggered a local fire alarm which forced the safety doors to release automatically, and in the confusion, he led Lily out through a technical passage while the guard was still turning toward the noise. Marcus stayed behind to block the pursuers, and then he turned himself into the police, because a man has to start somewhere. As they climbed toward the light, Lily looked up at the janitor holding her hand and said, "You don't look like a rescuer." Elijah answered, "Most people who save somebody aren't wearing the right clothes for it." The transfer of power meeting convened before the board, the major shareholders, the lawyers, the financial press, and a representative from the government partner. Adrian presented his case. Amelia was unwell. The sabotage rumor was baseless. Elijah was a bitter man. Lily was traumatized. The $2 billion contract had to be signed now. The majority prepared to vote. The doors opened. Amelia came in on crutches with Elijah, Lily, Noah, and Vanessa beside her. Adrian declared she had no right to be there, citing her medical records. Amelia answered, "If I'm not clear-headed enough to run this company, then let the clear-headed people in this room explain the evidence." She did not try to tell it all herself. She handed the floor to the people who had been looked down on. Lily didn't read a speech into a microphone. She laid her drawings out in order: Adrian and the car, the Apex worker holding the silver box, 3 red lights on a dashboard, her mother leaving the garage, the car crossing the intersection, Adrian asking her what she had heard, the room where she had been held. Noah put his time-stamped photographs on the screen beside them, confirming the places and times. The accounts of 2 children fit together into one unbroken timeline. Then Elijah stood before the board in his janitor's uniform because he had refused to change out of it, because he wanted every person in that room to have to look at the coverall while they listened to the truth. A member sneered that he was no longer a licensed engineer. Elijah did not flinch. "A bridge doesn't stop collapsing just because the man who warned about it lost his business card," he said, and the room stopped sneering. He explained it plainly in the language of people not engineers. A device had interfered with the brake signal in Amelia's car. The device exploited the very vulnerability inside Vale Meridian's own system. That same system, the one they were about to sell to a government, could be manipulated remotely by anyone who knew the flaw. The test reports had been altered to hide it. There had already been multiple accidents quietly reclassified as human error, and the company's entire $2 billion value rested on a single claim that the product was safe. To sign the contract without disclosing the flaw, he told them, would not be a business decision. It would be selling a machine that could make other people's cars forget how to stop. He said that last part, looking straight at Lily, and Lily nodded, because at last a grown-up was saying her sentence back to the world in words the world would believe. Marcus Voss walked in with the investigators. He handed over the original video of Adrian opening the garage footage of the technician fitting the device. The recording of Adrian ordering the cameras erased the recording, demanding Lily's silence in the payment records to Apex Dynamics. He admitted he had erased data and taken money, and he agreed to testify. Vanessa Cole then exposed the money. Adrian secretly owned shares in the competitor. He stood to make hundreds of millions if Vale Meridian were sold after the contract inflated its value. Amelia's accident had let him trigger the transfer clause. Several board members had received unusual consulting payments. Adrian had not been saving the company. He had been preparing to sell it. The vote was suspended, and Adrian cornered turned to Lily and in the gentle voice of the loving uncle said, "You know I would never hurt your mother." Lily looked at him and said, "Good people don't need kids to forget what they saw." It was the moment his control over her collapsed completely. Investigators arrested Adrian on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, sabotage of a vehicle, unlawful detention of a child, securities fraud, falsifying data obstruction, bribing a witness, and conspiracy to seize the company. Dr. Calvin Rhodes, the interim board chairman who had known something was wrong and chosen the stock price, was investigated along with the board members who had taken the payments. The $2 billion contract was suspended. The stock fell hard. Amelia had a chance to hide part of the evidence and save the company's value. She refused. At the press conference, Amelia did not lay all the blame on her brother. She admitted the company had put speed above safety, that she herself had ignored a warning that engineers had been pressured into silence, that no company's value could ever be worth more than a human life. Vale Meridian would recall the system and compensate the victims. She accepted that the company might lose most of its worth. That was how she proved she had actually changed. A new investigation reopened Elijah's old case. It showed his signature had been used without permission, that he had filed his warning correctly, that his supervisor had altered the report, and that Adrian had been part of buying and hiding the flawed technology. Elijah's engineering license was restored. The media called him a hero, and he was not comfortable with the word. He said, "I told the truth years ago. The only difference is that this time someone was willing to listen." Amelia offered Elijah the role of Director of Systems Safety. He did not accept right away. His conditions were exact. The safety division must be independent of the CEO. Workers must be able to report anonymously. No engineer could be fired for stopping a dangerous product. All test data must be stored on an outside system. Janitors, guards, and operations staff must all have the right to report anything wrong, and there would be a fund for the families the company had once blamed. Amelia agreed to all of it. Elijah added one more thing: the first people invited back would be the engineers who had been fired for opposing the flawed system. Amelia changed as a mother deliberately. She drove Lily herself. She turned her phone off at dinner. She stopped promising things she wasn't sure she could do. She asked her daughter what she felt instead of guessing. She went to therapy with her. One night she said, "I'm sorry I built a company to protect your future and wasn't there for you in the present." Lily did not forgive her with a long speech. She just slid her chair closer to her mother's, and after a while she leaned her head against Amelia's arm, and neither of them said anything at all. Because some of the most important things two people ever tell each other are said with no words in them. Noah and Lily became friends, real ones, the kind forged in something serious and then allowed to become ordinary. They rode bikes. They argued about lenses. Together they put on a show of photographs and drawings called "The Things Grown-Ups Don't See." Empty hallways, workers' hands. The camera's blind spots, a janitor's cart parked outside a boardroom, the CEO's office seen from under the desk where a small girl had once hidden a father holding a mop in front of a dark doorway. People who came to the show stood in front of that last photograph for a long time without knowing why. The two children raised a real amount of money for kids who had been witnesses in criminal cases and had no one patient enough to listen to them, which was, when you thought about it, the whole point of everything that had happened. The feeling between Elijah and Amelia arrived slowly over months. They worked side by side. Amelia learned to ask his opinion instead of giving orders. Elijah learned to stop seeing every powerful person as one of the people who had betrayed him. Amelia came to his apartment for dinner without an assistant. Elijah took her to the neighborhood where the people harmed by the company's products lived. He showed her the doorways in his old neighborhood where the light did not reach the families still waiting on a settlement, and she stood in those doorways in her expensive coat and did not look away, which was more than the old Amelia could have done. One evening she asked why he still kept his old janitor's uniform folded on a shelf when he could afford 100 suits. He said, "It reminds me that a title doesn't decide whether a person can see the truth. Some of the people who saw the most in that building were the ones nobody could name." A year later, Elijah walked into the Vale Meridian Tower. He was head of the safety division now, but he still came in through the staff entrance for operations. A new janitor recognized him and hurried to step aside. Elijah stopped, shook the man's hand, and asked his name. On the 42nd floor, the CEO's office was no longer a sealed room. Amelia had turned part of it into an independent center for receiving warnings. On her desk sat Lily's first drawing, a black car, 3 red lights, a man holding a mop, and the words in a child's hand. "The first person who believed me." Elijah walked into the meeting room. Through the glass, Noah and Lily were hanging photographs for a new show. Amelia asked, "Are you ready for the inspection?" Elijah set his files on the table and said, "Not a product inspection. This time we're inspecting the whole system." The door closed behind him, but this time there was no secret waiting on the other side. And somewhere below, a janitor whose name he now knew was pushing a cart down a quiet hall, seeing everything the way people at the edges of the frame always do. Nobody ever really sees the people who clean the room, but they are the ones who see everything the powerful try to hide. A janitor and 2 children took apart a $2 billion lie, not with power, but with patience, a camera, a stack of drawings, and a grown man who was willing to sit on the floor and wait for a frightened girl to be ready. The company lost most of its value and kept its conscience, and 2 broken families finally began to heal. If this story stayed with you, don't scroll away yet. Hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, do you think the truth always finds a way out, or does it need someone brave enough to carry it? I read every single one, and I'll see you in the next story.